You feel overwhelmed by life's pressures that seem to multiply daily, watching others maintain their composure while every setback shakes your confidence to the core. The stress follows you everywhere, affecting your sleep, your relationships, and your peace of mind while you wonder if you're strong enough to handle what life keeps throwing at you. I am Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who maintained inner peace while ruling the most powerful empire in history, bearing the weight of millions of lives during plagues, wars, and constant political turmoil. Through my daily practice of Stoic philosophy, I discovered how to build an unshakable fortress of calm that no external pressure could penetrate, developing principles that sustained me through the darkest times any leader has faced. The 10 Stoic laws I'll share with you today will give you the same inner strength that allowed me to govern an empire while finding tranquility in chaos. These aren't mere theories, they're battle-tested principles forged in the crucible of absolute responsibility and refined through years of personal struggle and philosophical meditation. But first, like this video, subscribe for more timeless wisdom and comment below where you're watching from. I want to see how far the need for true inner strength has spread across our modern world. When I was 17, I thought I understood power. Born into privilege, groomed for greatness, I believed that commanding others would bring me the control I craved over my life. I was Marcus Annius Verus then, a young man fascinated by rhetoric and law, dreaming of a life spent in philosophical discourse and intellectual pursuits. Then Emperor Antoninus Pius adopted me, and everything changed. Suddenly, I wasn't just a student of philosophy. I was heir to the greatest empire the world had ever known. The purple stripe on my toga, marking my elevated status, felt heavier than any chain. With it came the weight of expectations, the burden of millions of lives, and the terrifying reality that one day all of Rome would rest on my shoulders. I remember the night I first truly grasped what lay ahead. I was walking through the palace gardens, trying to escape the suffocating atmosphere of court politics and endless preparations for my future role. The marble statues of previous emperors seemed to watch me, their carved faces bearing expressions of strength and certainty I didn't feel within myself. How could I possibly measure up to their legacy? How could someone who preferred books to battles, philosophy to politics, rule an empire that stretched from Britain to Egypt? That's when the panic set in. My heart raced, my palms grew sweaty, and I felt the crushing weight of destiny pressing down on me like a physical force. I realized that no amount of education, no family connections, no natural talent could prepare me for the magnitude of what was coming. The external power everyone envied felt like a prison sentence. It was in that moment of desperation that I first turned to the Stoic philosophers I had studied as intellectual exercises. What if, I wondered, true power wasn't about controlling others, but about controlling myself? What if the strength I needed wasn't in commanding legions, but in commanding my own thoughts, emotions, and reactions? I began to see that every emperor before me had faced this same realization. The purple cloak, the golden crown, the cheers of the crowd, none of these external symbols of power could touch the internal chaos that comes with overwhelming responsibility. The greatest leaders weren't those who never felt fear or doubt, but those who felt it and chose to act with virtue. Anyway, this understanding transformed my entire approach to leadership and life. Instead of seeking control over circumstances I couldn't influence, the weather that affected campaigns, the loyalty of distant governors, the fickleness of public opinion, I focused on mastering the one domain where I had complete sovereignty, my own mind. The young man who once trembled at the thought of responsibility became an emperor who could face plagues, wars, and betrayals with equanimity, not because I was naturally brave, but because I learned that true courage isn't the absence of fear. It's feeling the fear and choosing wisdom over panic, duty over comfort, virtue over expedience. This was my first glimpse into the power of Stoic philosophy. It didn't promise to make life easier or eliminate challenges. Instead, it offered something far more valuable, the tools to remain unshakable regardless of what storms might come. The 10 laws I'm about to share with you grew from this fundamental realization that the only kingdom worth ruling is the kingdom within yourself. The first and most fundamental law that will transform your life is this: distinguish absolutely between what you can control and what you cannot. This principle became my anchor during the darkest period of my reign, the Antonine Plague that swept across our empire like the wrath of the gods themselves. I still remember the morning when the reports first reached me. A mysterious disease had emerged in the eastern provinces, killing thousands. My advisors panicked, demanding immediate action. Close the borders, they said. Quarantine entire cities. Send more physicians. Their desperation was understandable, but it revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of control that would have led to chaos. I could not control the disease itself. I could not prevent death from claiming both peasants and patricians alike. I could not make the physicians more skilled or the remedies more effective. These were the realities I had to accept, no matter how much my heart ached for my suffering. People. But here's what I could control: my response to the crisis. I could choose courage over fear, rational planning over emotional reaction, personal sacrifice over self-preservation. I could control my thoughts about the plague, seeing it not as a cosmic punishment, but as a test of our collective character. Most importantly, I could control my actions, ensuring that every decision I made served the greater good rather than my own comfort. This distinction changed everything. Instead of wasting precious energy raging against circumstances beyond my influence, I channeled all my focus into what lay within my power. I personally distributed food to the hungry, comforted the grieving, and made difficult decisions about resource allocation. When my advisors suggested I flee Rome for my safety, I remained because my presence was something I could control, and my people needed to see that their emperor would not abandon them. The practice I developed during this crisis became my daily discipline. Each morning, before addressing the affairs of state, I would mentally sort the day's challenges into 2 categories: those within my control and those beyond it. The weather that might affect military campaigns, beyond my control, my preparation. And strategic response to any weather, completely within my control. A senator's loyalty, I could not reach into his heart and change it. But my own integrity, the example I set, and the policies I implemented, these were mine to command. An enemy's decision to attack our borders, beyond my influence. But the readiness of our defenses, the morale of our troops, and my own courage. In battle, these belonged entirely to me. This law liberates you from the exhausting burden of trying to control the uncontrollable. When you accept that you cannot change other people's opinions, the weather, the economy, or the past, you free tremendous energy to focus on what actually matters: your thoughts, your choices, your responses, and your character. I watched senators waste years trying to control imperial succession through manipulation and scheming when they could have built unshakable influence through competence and virtue. I saw generals break under the pressure of trying to guarantee victory when they could have found peace in ensuring they fought with honor and tactical excellence regardless of the outcome. The moment you truly embrace this first law, anxiety begins to dissolve. Why? Because anxiety is almost always rooted in trying to control what cannot be controlled. When you redirect that same energy toward your sphere of influence, your thoughts, your preparation, your character, you discover a power far greater than any external force. You become unshakable, not because nothing can touch you, but because you know exactly where your true strength lies. The second law that will revolutionize your perspective is this: embrace the temporary nature of all existence. Nothing lasts forever. Not your problems, not your pleasures, not even your life itself. This truth, rather than being morbid, becomes the source of profound peace and clarity. I learned this lesson not through philosophical study, but through the harsh reality of watching an empire's mortality unfold before my eyes. During the Germanic Wars, I spent years on the frontier, far from Rome's marble halls and comfortable illusions. There, surrounded by the aftermath of battles, I witnessed firsthand how quickly strength becomes weakness, how swiftly the living become memory. One evening, as I walked through a field where Romans and Germans had fought just days before, I was struck by a powerful realization. The soldiers who had died here, both my men and our enemies, had awakened that morning believing they would see another sunset. They had worried about promotion, about letters from home, about whether their armor fit properly. Now they were gone, and in 100 years no one would remember their names. This wasn't a depressing thought. It was liberating. If everything is temporary, including our current struggles, why do we torture ourselves over temporary setbacks? Why do we cling so desperately to temporary pleasures? Why do we fear temporary pain when we know it cannot last? I began practicing what I called the meditation on impermanence. Each morning, I would remind myself that this day, with all its challenges and responsibilities, was temporary. The difficult senator who opposed my policies, his opposition was temporary. The military campaign that seemed to drag on endlessly, it too would pass. Even my reign, which felt so permanent and weighty, was merely a brief moment in Rome's long history. This practice transformed my relationship with both success and failure. When news arrived of a great military victory, I celebrated appropriately, but didn't let it inflate my ego. Victory was temporary. When word came of setbacks, rebellions in distant provinces, economic troubles, political opposition, I addressed them seriously, but didn't let them devastate me. These troubles, too, were temporary. The most profound application of this law came when I contemplated my own mortality. Rather than avoiding thoughts of death, I embraced them. I would often reflect, "Marcus, you will die. This body will return to dust. Your name may be remembered for a time, but eventually even that will fade." Far from making me morose, this meditation filled me with urgency and purpose. If my time was limited, how should I spend it? On petty grudges or on serving others? On accumulating wealth I couldn't take with me, or on building character that would define my legacy? On fearing change, or on embracing each moment as the gift it was? This awareness of impermanence also deepened my appreciation for everything I experienced. The taste of simple bread became more precious when I remembered I wouldn't taste it forever. Conversations with friends became more meaningful when I acknowledged that our time together was finite. Even the burden of leadership became more bearable when I viewed it as a temporary privilege rather than a permanent curse. Understanding impermanence doesn't make you reckless or nihilistic, it makes you wise. You stop wasting energy on things that don't matter because you recognize how little time you have for what does matter. You stop taking people and experiences for granted because you know they won't always be there. You find peace in change because you accept that change is the only constant in a temporary world. The third law that will fundamentally change your life is this: master the voice in your head, for it has the power to create heaven or hell regardless of your external circumstances. Your thoughts are not facts, they are interpretations, and you have the power to choose better interpretations. I discovered this truth during the bleakest period of the Germanic Wars, when I spent months in military camps along the Danube frontier. The conditions were harsh, the enemy relentless, and the weight of command seemed to grow heavier each day. My mind, left unchecked, began to spiral into dark territories, doubt about my capabilities, anger at the barbarian tribes, frustration with the slow progress of our campaigns. One particularly difficult night, after receiving news that another Roman outpost had fallen, I found myself consumed by a torrent of negative thoughts. "I'm failing as an emperor," my mind whispered. "Rome is weakening under my leadership. History will remember me as the ruler who lost the frontier." These thoughts felt absolutely real and true, feeding on themselves until I was drowning in despair. Then I caught myself. I stepped back and observed what was happening. These weren't divine revelations or objective truths. They were simply thoughts, mental interpretations of events that could be viewed in countless ways. The fallen outpost could be seen as a failure, yes, but it could also be viewed as intelligence about enemy movements, or as motivation to strengthen our remaining defenses, or as a reminder that war involves setbacks that test our resolve. Began to examine each thought like a scientist studying specimens. When my mind said, "This campaign is hopeless," I would ask, "Is this thought helpful? Is it accurate? What would a wise strategist think about this situation?" Often I discovered that my initial thoughts were neither helpful nor accurate. They were just the mind's automatic response to difficulty. I developed what I called the discipline of perception, the practice of catching my thoughts and consciously choosing better ones. Instead of, "I'm overwhelmed by these responsibilities," I would think, "I'm being given the opportunity to grow stronger through challenge." Instead of, "These senators are impossible to work with," I would think, "I'm learning patience and diplomacy through difficult people." This wasn't positive thinking or self-delusion. It was choosing the most useful and accurate interpretation of events. A military setback could be viewed as a disaster or as valuable information about enemy tactics. A critical senator could be seen as an enemy or as someone whose concerns might help me govern more effectively. A plague could be viewed as divine punishment or as a test of our civilization's character and resilience. The transformation was remarkable. By changing my internal dialogue, I changed my entire experience of leadership. The same challenges that once felt crushing became manageable. When I interpreted them differently, the same political opponents who once infuriated me became interesting puzzles to solve when I saw them as people with their own fears and motivations rather than enemies to defeat. This practice extends to every area of life. When your mind tells you, "I'm not good enough," you can ask, "According to what standard? And is this thought helping me improve or just making me suffer?" When you think, "This person doesn't respect me," you can wonder, "How do I know this? And what would someone who already felt confident think about this interaction?" Your mind will always generate thoughts. That's what minds do. But you don't have to believe every thought or let every thought determine your emotional state. You can become the editor of your own mental experience, choosing thoughts that serve your highest good while discarding those that merely create suffering without purpose. The fourth law that will simplify every difficult decision you ever face is this: virtue is the only true good, and everything else, wealth, status, pleasure, even health, is merely indifferent. This sounds radical, but once you understand it, you'll discover a freedom that no external circumstance can touch. Learned this lesson through a profound personal crisis early in my reign. Rome's treasury was overflowing. I commanded the most powerful military in the world, and citizens throughout the empire praised my leadership. By every external measure, I was the most successful man alive, yet I felt empty, anxious, and uncertain about every decision I made. The turning point came during a meeting with my advisors about increasing taxes to fund new public works. One senator argued passionately that building more monuments would secure my legacy and increase the people's admiration for my reign. Another insisted that lowering taxes would make me more popular with the wealthy merchants who funded political careers. A third suggested that spending the money on military expansion would ensure Rome's dominance for generations. As I listened to their arguments, I realized they were all focused on externals: legacy, popularity, power, none of which I could truly control. A monument could be torn down by future emperors. Popular opinion could shift overnight. Military dominance could crumble with a single catastrophic defeat. If I based my decisions on these uncertain foundations, I would never find peace. That night I asked myself a different question. What would virtue demand in this situation? Not what would make me popular, not what would increase my wealth or power, but what would justice, temperance, courage, and wisdom require? The answer became crystal clear. Justice demanded that I consider the welfare of all citizens, not just the wealthy. Temperance suggested avoiding wasteful spending on vanity projects. Courage meant making the right decision, even if it was unpopular. Wisdom called for long-term thinking about Rome's true needs. I chose to use the surplus to strengthen Rome's defenses and improve infrastructure that would serve the people for generations. Some senators criticized the decision, others praised it, but their opinions couldn't touch the deep satisfaction I felt from knowing I had acted virtuously. This experience revealed the revolutionary truth that virtue is the only thing that cannot be taken from you. Enemies can steal your wealth, time can erode your health, political winds can destroy your reputation, but no external force can make you act with cowardice, injustice, or dishonor unless you choose to do so. I began evaluating every opportunity and challenge through this lens. When generals urged me to pursue questionable military campaigns that might bring glory but would cost thousands of lives, I asked what courage and justice demanded, not what would enhance my reputation. When court flatterers suggested policies that would benefit the wealthy at the expense of the poor, I considered what wisdom and temperance required, not what would increase my popularity with influential citizens. This principle transformed my relationship with loss and disappointment. When I faced military setbacks, political opposition, or personal grief, I could maintain my peace by asking, has this event prevented me from acting virtuously? The answer was always no. External circumstances might limit my options, but they could never force me to compromise my character. Understanding virtue as the only true good also liberated me from the exhausting pursuit of externals. I stopped trying to accumulate wealth beyond what was needed for virtuous purposes. I stopped craving universal approval, knowing that some people would always disapprove of virtuous actions. I stopped fearing death, recognizing that a life lived virtuously was complete regardless of its length. This doesn't mean external things don't matter at all. Health is preferable to sickness, wealth to poverty, but they're preferences, not goods. True good lies in how you respond to whatever circumstances you face, always choosing the path of virtue regardless of the cost. The fifth law that will revolutionize how you face adversity is this: every obstacle is an opportunity to practice virtue and grow stronger. What stands in the way becomes the way forward. This principle turned my greatest challenges into my most valuable teachers. I discovered this truth during what historians now call the Antonine Plague, when death swept through our empire like wildfire. The disease showed no respect for rank or virtue. It claimed slaves and senators, children and elders, the faithful and the skeptical, with equal ruthlessness. My advisors saw only catastrophe, my generals saw only weakness in our defenses, and my citizens saw only evidence that the gods had abandoned Rome. But I chose to see something different. Yes, the plague was a devastating obstacle to our prosperity and security, but it was also an unprecedented opportunity to demonstrate the values that made Rome great. While others fled to their country estates, I remained in the capital. While some hoarded resources, I opened the imperial granaries to feed the hungry. While fear drove people apart, I worked to unite them in common purpose. The plague forced me to develop qualities I had never needed before. Managing the crisis required innovative thinking. We created new systems for caring for orphans, new methods for maintaining civic order with reduced personnel, new approaches to keeping trade flowing despite widespread illness. The disaster demanded courage as I visited infected areas to boost morale, knowing I risked my own life. It called for justice as I allocated limited medical resources fairly rather than favoring the wealthy and powerful. Each day brought new obstacles that seemed insurmountable. Food shortages forced me to learn about agriculture and supply chains. Medical challenges pushed me to consult with physicians and develop public health policies. Social unrest taught me about human psychology under extreme stress. Every problem that the plague created became a master class in leadership, governance, and human nature. I began to see this pattern everywhere. When barbarian tribes pressed our northern borders, the military challenge forced our armies to innovate new tactics and strategies. When corrupt governors threatened provincial stability, the political crisis gave me opportunities to reform our administrative systems. When senators opposed my policies, their resistance taught me better methods of persuasion and compromise. The key insight was that obstacles don't just test existing strength, they create new strength. A muscle that meets no resistance never grows. A mind that faces no challenges never develops. A character that encounters no adversity never discovers its true capacity. The plague didn't just reveal who I was as a leader, it forced me to become a better leader than I had ever been before. This perspective transforms your relationship with difficulty. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you start asking, "What is this teaching me?" Instead of seeing setbacks as evidence of failure, you recognize them as invitations to grow. Instead of avoiding challenges, you begin to welcome them as opportunities to discover capabilities you didn't know you possessed. Learn to approach each obstacle with curiosity rather than resentment. What virtue could this situation help me develop? What skills was it forcing me to acquire? What aspects of my character was it revealing that needed strengthening? What innovations might emerge from working within these constraints? This doesn't mean celebrating suffering or seeking out unnecessary hardship. It means recognizing that since obstacles are inevitable, we might as well extract every possible benefit from them. The same energy you would spend resenting your challenges can be redirected toward learning from them, growing through them, and emerging stronger because of them. Every obstacle contains within it the seeds of equivalent or greater benefit, but only if you approach it with the right mindset. The impediment becomes the path forward when you use it as raw material for building strength, wisdom, and virtue. The sixth law that will align your life with cosmic harmony is this: live according to your nature as a rational social being. This means using reason to guide your actions and serving the common good rather than just your personal desires. When you fight against your nature, you create unnecessary suffering. When you embrace it, you find profound peace. I understood this law most clearly during my time on the Germanic frontier, far from the civilized comforts of Rome. Surrounded by endless forests and hostile tribes, I had plenty of time to observe both human nature and the natural world. I watched wolves hunt in coordinated packs, each animal playing its role for the survival of the whole. I observed how rivers flowed not by forcing their way through obstacles, but by finding the path of least resistance while never abandoning their essential direction toward the sea. This led me to a crucial realization about my own nature. As a human being, I possessed reason, the ability to think, plan, and choose my responses rather than simply react by instinct. This rational capacity was my defining characteristic, what separated me from other animals. But I was also inherently social, designed by nature to live in community with others and contribute to our collective flourishing. For years, I had struggled against this dual nature. My philosophical temperament wanted solitude and contemplation. But my position demanded constant interaction with senators, generals, and citizens. I resented the social obligations that pulled me away from my studies, viewing them as obstacles to my true calling. This internal conflict created enormous stress and dissatisfaction. Then I realized I was fighting against my own nature. I wasn't just Marcus the philosopher. I was Marcus the rational social being, designed to use my capacity for thought in service of others. My philosophical insights weren't meant to be hoarded in private contemplation. They were meant to be applied for the benefit of Rome and humanity. My reason wasn't separate from my social obligations. It was the tool I was supposed to use to fulfill them excellently. This understanding transformed my approach to leadership. Instead of seeing governance as a distraction from philosophy, I began to view it as philosophy in action. Every decision I made became an opportunity to apply rational thinking to real problems. Every interaction with citizens became a chance to practice virtue in a social context. Every challenge of leadership became a way to serve the common good that my nature demanded I support. I stopped fighting against my responsibilities and started embracing them as expressions of who I was designed to be. An emperor who tried to live like a hermit would be as unnatural as a wolf trying to hunt alone or a river trying to flow uphill. My nature called me to engage with the world rationally and constructively, not to escape from it. This principle extends beyond leadership to every aspect of human life. You are designed to use reason rather than being driven purely by emotion or impulse. When you make decisions based on careful thought rather than immediate desires, you're living according to your rational nature. When you consider the long-term consequences of your actions rather than just their immediate pleasure, you're honoring your capacity for higher thinking. You're also designed to be social, to contribute to something beyond your own narrow interests. When you help others, support your community, or work for causes greater than yourself, you're fulfilling your social nature. When you isolate yourself completely or live only for personal gain, you're fighting against what you were designed to be. Living according to nature doesn't mean becoming passive or accepting everything that happens. It means using your unique human gifts, reason and social consciousness, to respond to life's challenges in ways that benefit both yourself and others. It means finding the path that honors both your individual talents and your role in the larger human community. The seventh law that will immunize you against disappointment and fill you with gratitude is this: regularly imagine losing what you value most. This practice, which I called negative visualization, doesn't make you pessimistic. It makes you prepared, grateful, and emotionally resilient. I began this practice during the early years of my reign when I noticed how easily comfort bred complacency. Living in the imperial palace, surrounded by luxury and deference, I started taking my blessings for granted. The abundance of food seemed natural. The loyalty of my guard seemed guaranteed. The stability of the empire seemed permanent. This assumption of continuity made me soft and unprepared for the inevitable changes that life would bring. So I developed a daily exercise that transformed my perspective completely. Each morning I would spend a few minutes imagining the loss of things I valued. I would picture myself without the throne, perhaps exiled to some distant province with only basic necessities. I would imagine the empire fractured by civil war, with Romans fighting Romans in the streets. I would contemplate the death of trusted advisors, the rebellion of loyal generals, the destruction of cities I loved. This wasn't morbid fantasy, it was practical preparation. By imagining these losses in advance, I accomplished several important things. First, I became genuinely grateful for what I currently possessed. When I pictured Rome in ruins, I felt profound appreciation for the peace and prosperity that actually surrounded me. When I imagined myself stripped of power, I valued more deeply the opportunity to serve that I currently enjoyed. Second, this practice prepared me emotionally for actual setbacks when they came. When word arrived that Germanic tribes had broken through our frontier defenses, I wasn't devastated because I had already mentally rehearsed such scenarios. When trusted generals died in battle, the grief was real but manageable because I had contemplated the impermanence of all relationships. When economic troubles strained the treasury, I remained calm because I had imagined governing with limited resources. The most powerful application of this practice came when I contemplated my own mortality. Rather than avoiding thoughts of death, I embraced them regularly. I would imagine my funeral, picture how Rome would continue without me, envision my successor, facing the same challenges I currently faced. This contemplation didn't make me morose. It made me urgent about using my remaining time wisely. When you regularly contemplate losing your health, you stop taking your body for granted and become motivated to care for it properly. When you imagine losing your job, you appreciate your current employment more deeply and perhaps develop backup skills. When you picture the death of loved ones, you treat them with greater kindness and spend time with them more consciously. This practice also revealed the absurdity of many worries. When I was stressed about a senator's criticism of my policies, I would imagine losing the throne entirely. Suddenly, political opposition seemed trivial. When I felt frustrated by slow progress in military campaigns, I would picture Rome completely conquered by enemies. Immediately, our current challenges seemed manageable rather than overwhelming. Negative visualization works because it adjusts your emotional baseline. Instead of expecting everything to always improve, you prepare for the possibility that things might worsen. This preparation doesn't create pessimism. It creates resilience. You become like a well-trained soldier who has mentally rehearsed various battle scenarios and can therefore respond calmly when actual conflict emerges. The practice also highlights what truly matters. When you imagine losing your wealth, you realize that your relationships are more important than your possessions. When you contemplate serious illness, you understand that your health is more valuable than your status. When you picture your own death, you clarify which activities are meaningful and which are merely distractions. Regular negative visualization doesn't attract misfortune. It prepares you to handle misfortune with grace and to appreciate good fortune with genuine gratitude. The eighth law that will end your anxiety and multiply your effectiveness is this: live fully in the present moment, for it is the only time when you have any real power. The past exists only in memory, the future only in imagination. But life happens now, and now is where all your strength lies. I learned this lesson during one of the most overwhelming periods of my reign, when crises seemed to assault Rome from every direction simultaneously. Germanic tribes pressed our northern borders while plague ravaged our eastern provinces. Political opponents in the Senate questioned every policy, while economic troubles strained our resources. The weight of past mistakes and future uncertainties threatened to crush my ability to function in the present. I remember sitting in my private study one evening, surrounded by reports that demanded immediate attention. My mind raced between regrets about previous decisions and fears about upcoming challenges. I was paralyzed by the enormity of everything that needed to be addressed, unable to focus on any single task because I was trying to solve all problems at once, including problems that existed only in my imagination of possible futures. Then I caught myself and asked a simple question: what can I actually do right now? In this moment, not tomorrow, not next month, not if circumstances were different, but right now, with the time and resources currently available to me. The answer was remarkably clear. I could read one report completely, make one decision thoughtfully, write one letter carefully. Just one thing, done with full attention and care. I picked up the first document and committed myself entirely to understanding it. Instead of skimming while my mind wandered to other concerns, I read every word with complete focus. Instead of rushing to judgment while thinking about the next problem, I considered the situation thoroughly before deciding. The quality of my attention transformed both my understanding and my decision-making. This experience revealed a profound truth. The present moment contains all the power you will ever have. You cannot change decisions you made yesterday. Those belong to the past and exist only as learning opportunities. You cannot control events that might happen tomorrow. Those belong to the future and may never occur as you imagine them. But you can choose your thoughts, actions, and responses right now in this moment. I began practicing what I called the discipline of presence. When meeting with advisors, instead of half listening while planning my next appointment, I gave them my complete attention. When reviewing military reports, instead of worrying about hypothetical future battles, I focused entirely on current intelligence and immediate strategic needs. When walking through the palace gardens, instead of rehearsing speeches or reliving. Conversations. I noticed the texture of stone paths, the scent of flowering trees, the sound of fountains. This practice didn't make me less effective. It made me far more effective. Decisions made with full attention were better than decisions made while distracted. Conversations conducted with complete presence were more productive than interactions where part of my mind was elsewhere. Actions taken with total focus achieved better results than activities performed while mentally scattered. The present moment also became my refuge from regret and anxiety. When guilt about past mistakes threatened to overwhelm me, I would return to now. What can I do about this situation right now? When fear of future catastrophes began to paralyze me, I would anchor myself in the present. What action does this moment require? The answers were always manageable because they dealt with concrete realities rather than abstract possibilities. This focus on presence transformed my relationship with stress. Stress almost always comes from mental time travel, reliving past failures, or imagining future disasters. When you commit fully to the present moment, stress dissolves because you're dealing with what actually exists rather than what might exist or what once existed. The present moment is also where life's pleasures reside. You cannot enjoy yesterday's meal or tomorrow's vacation. You can only experience the food you're tasting now, the conversation you're having now, the beauty you're witnessing now. By living fully in the present, you don't just become more effective, you become more alive. The ninth law that will give you unshakable stability is this: maintain emotional equilibrium by avoiding extremes of elation and despair. True strength lies not in the absence of emotion, but in experiencing feelings without being controlled by them. You become like a skilled sailor who adjusts to changing winds without being blown off course. I discovered the power of this principle during the dramatic swings of military fortune that characterized the Germanic wars. In a single week, I might receive news of a crushing defeat that cost us thousands of lives, followed by reports of a brilliant victory that secured a crucial strategic position. My initial reactions were intense, devastating grief at our losses, then soaring pride at our triumphs. But I noticed that these emotional extremes undermined my effectiveness as a leader. When I celebrated victories too enthusiastically, I became overconfident and made reckless decisions. When I mourned defeats too deeply, I became paralyzed by despair and failed to capitalize on remaining opportunities. The emotional roller coaster was exhausting for me and confusing for my subordinates, who needed consistent leadership regardless of changing circumstances. I began practicing what I called the discipline of equilibrium. When good news arrived, I allowed myself to feel satisfaction and gratitude, but I reminded myself that this success was temporary and could easily reverse. When bad news came, I acknowledged the disappointment and learned from any mistakes, but I refused to let setbacks define my entire assessment of our situation. This didn't mean becoming emotionally numb or pretending that victories and defeats were equally insignificant. It meant maintaining perspective, understanding that both success and failure were part of a larger pattern, temporary events in an ongoing campaign, rather than final judgments on our ultimate worth or destiny. I developed specific practices to maintain this balance. After receiving news of any major event, I would pause before responding and ask myself, how will this matter in 10 years? What would a wise leader think about the situation? What response would serve Rome's long-term interests rather than just reflecting my immediate emotional reaction? This practice proved invaluable during the most challenging crisis of my reign. When word arrived that a trusted general had been killed in an ambush, my immediate reaction was rage. I wanted to launch an immediate punitive expedition regardless of strategic considerations. But equilibrium demanded that I step back, grieve appropriately for a fallen friend, learn from the tactical mistakes that led to his death, and then plan our response based on reason rather than emotion. The principle extends beyond major events to daily interactions. When senators praised my policies, I felt pleased but reminded myself that public opinion was fickle, and their approval didn't necessarily mean my decisions were correct. When critics attacked my leadership, I felt stung but forced myself to consider whether their objections contained valid points rather than simply dismissing them because they were unpleasant to hear. Emotional equilibrium also improved my relationships. Instead of being effusively grateful when people helped me and coldly angry when they disappointed me, I maintained steady appreciation for those who served Rome faithfully while calmly addressing problems with those who fell short of expectations. This consistency made me more trustworthy and easier to work with. The practice requires understanding that emotions are information, not commands. Anger tells you that something seems unjust, but it doesn't dictate how you should respond. Joy indicates that something aligns with your values, but it doesn't mean you should abandon all caution. Fear suggests possible danger, but it doesn't require you to flee from every risk. By observing your emotions without being enslaved by them, you gain access to their wisdom while maintaining your freedom to choose appropriate responses. You become like a mountain that acknowledges changing weather without being fundamentally altered by storms or sunshine. This equilibrium doesn't make you less human. It makes you more fully human, able to experience the full range of emotions, while using reason to guide your actions toward what truly serves your highest good and the good of others. The 10th and final law that will transform your life from mere existence into profound meaning is this: dedicate yourself to serving something greater than your personal desires. True fulfillment comes not from accumulating pleasures or achievements for yourself, but from contributing to the welfare of others and the betterment of humanity. I understood this law most deeply during the darkest hours of the Antonine Plague, when my personal comfort and safety meant nothing compared to my duty to Rome. While wealthy citizens fled to their country estates and foreign dignitaries avoided our capital, I remained in the city not because I was braver than others, but because serving the empire was more important than preserving myself. Every morning during that crisis, I faced a choice between personal safety and public duty. My advisors urged me to retreat to a secure location until the plague passed. My physicians warned that remaining in Rome significantly increased my risk of infection. My family worried about my health and begged me to prioritize my own survival. All of these concerns were reasonable and based on genuine care for my well-being. But I had discovered something more powerful than self-preservation: the deep satisfaction that comes from serving a cause greater than yourself. When I distributed food to hungry citizens, comforted grieving families, and organized medical care for the sick, I felt more alive and purposeful than I ever had while pursuing personal pleasures or achievements. The more I gave of myself to Rome's welfare, the more meaning I found in my own existence. This wasn't sacrifice in the sense of loss. It was investment in something that multiplied the value of every action I took. When I made decisions based solely on personal benefit, the results felt hollow and temporary. But when I made choices that served the common good, even difficult decisions carried a weight and significance that transcended my individual concerns. I began to see this principle operating throughout nature and society. Bees work tirelessly, not for their own benefit, but for the survival of their hive. Rivers don't flow for their own glory, but to nourish the lands through which they pass. The sun doesn't shine for its own warmth, but to sustain all life on earth. Even in human relationships, the most fulfilled people were those who found ways to contribute to their families, communities, and civilization. This understanding transformed my approach to every aspect of leadership. Instead of asking, "What will this decision do for my reputation?" I asked, "What will this decision do for Rome?" Instead of seeking policies that would make me popular, I pursued initiatives that would make the empire stronger and more just. Instead of surrounding myself with flatterers who boosted my ego, I chose advisors who challenged me to serve more effectively. The practice also changed how I handled personal setbacks and disappointments. When individual plans failed, or when I faced criticism, these events seemed less devastating because my primary identity wasn't tied to personal success, but to service. As long as I was contributing to something larger than myself, temporary failures and fluctuations in my personal fortunes became less significant. This law doesn't require you to become an emperor or lead vast organizations. You can serve something greater by being an excellent parent who raises children with strong character. You can contribute by being a craftsman who takes pride in creating something useful and beautiful. You can serve by being a friend who genuinely cares about others' welfare, a citizen who votes thoughtfully, a neighbor who helps during difficulties. The key is shifting your primary focus from "what can I get" to "what can I give," from "how can this benefit me" to "how can this benefit others." This shift doesn't diminish your life. It enlarges it beyond the narrow confines of personal concerns to encompass the broader human experience. When you serve something greater than yourself, you become part of something that will outlast your individual existence, and this connection to permanence gives your temporary life profound meaning and lasting significance. Now that you understand the 10 fundamental laws, let me share how I made them part of my daily life through what I called the practice of dawn reflection. Each morning, before the demands of empire could scatter my thoughts, I would spend time preparing my mind for the day ahead using these Stoic principles as my guide. I would rise before sunrise, while the palace was still quiet and my mind was clear from sleep. This wasn't just a practical choice. It was a philosophical necessity. The morning hours offered the only time when I could think without interruption, when I could align my intentions with my values before the chaos of leadership consumed my attention. My first question was always, what can I control today, and what must I accept? I would mentally review my planned activities, meetings with senators, military briefings, administrative decisions, and separate them into 2 categories: the outcomes of these activities, other people's responses, unexpected events that might arise. These I acknowledged as beyond my direct control. But my preparation, my attitude, my responses, my commitment to virtue, these remained entirely within my power. Next, I would contemplate impermanence. What will I do today if this is my last day to serve Rome? This wasn't morbid thinking, but urgent prioritization. If I only had one day left, would I waste time on petty political disputes or focus on meaningful governance? Would I hold grudges against senators who opposed me, or would I try to understand their concerns and find common ground? This daily reminder of mortality helped me distinguish between what was truly important and what was merely urgent. I would then examine my planned thoughts and conversations. How will I interpret the events I encounter today? If I expected a difficult meeting with resistant senators, I could choose to see them as obstacles to overcome or as fellow Romans with legitimate concerns that deserved respectful consideration. If military reports brought news of setbacks, I could view them as disasters or as opportunities to demonstrate resilience and adaptability. The practice included reviewing my commitment to virtue. How will I embody justice, courage, temperance, and wisdom today? I would identify specific situations where each virtue might be tested. Justice might require me to make unpopular decisions that serve the common good. Courage might demand that I address problems others preferred to ignore. Temperance might mean refusing excessive luxury or moderating my emotional reactions. Wisdom might call for seeking counsel and thinking carefully before acting. I would practice negative visualization. What could go wrong today, and how will I respond virtuously if it does? I might imagine receiving news of military defeats, economic crises, or political opposition. By mentally rehearsing these scenarios, I prepared myself to respond with equanimity rather than panic if they actually occurred. Finally, I would set my intention to remain present. How will I give my full attention to each moment today? Rather than rushing through meetings while thinking about the next appointment, I committed to being completely present with each person and task. Rather than letting my mind wander to past regrets or future anxieties, I pledged to engage fully with whatever the current moment required. This entire reflection took perhaps 20 minutes, but those 20 minutes shaped everything that followed. I would enter the day with clear priorities, realistic expectations, and a calm determination to act virtuously regardless of circumstances. Instead of being reactive, allowing events to determine my mood and responses, I became proactive, approaching each situation with philosophical preparation and moral clarity. The practice also created a sense of continuity between my inner life and my public duties. Instead of feeling torn between Marcus the philosopher and Marcus the emperor, I used my philosophical insights to become a better leader, and my leadership challenges to deepen my philosophical understanding. This morning discipline became the foundation for everything else I accomplished. It transformed random events into opportunities for growth, difficult people into teachers of patience, and overwhelming responsibilities into chances to practice virtue. Just as I began each day with philosophical preparation, I ended each day with what I called the discipline of evening review. This practice allowed me to learn from my experiences, celebrate my growth, and prepare for continued improvement. It transformed each day from a series of random events into deliberate steps toward wisdom and virtue. After completing my official duties and before sleep, I would retire to my private chambers with my journal, the collection of thoughts that would later become known as my meditations. This wasn't merely record-keeping. It was active philosophy, the daily practice of examining my life through the lens of Stoic principles. I would begin by asking, where did I practice the 10 laws successfully today? Perhaps I had maintained emotional equilibrium during a heated Senate debate, or focused completely on the present moment during a crucial military briefing, or served something greater than myself by prioritizing Rome's needs over my personal comfort. Acknowledging these successes wasn't self-congratulation, but recognition of philosophical progress, evidence that the principles were becoming integrated into my character. Then came the more challenging question. Where did I fall short of my philosophical ideals today? Maybe I had tried to control something beyond my influence, becoming frustrated when senators didn't immediately accept my proposals. Perhaps I had failed to see an obstacle as an opportunity, reacting with irritation instead of curiosity when problems arose. Or I might have lived in the future instead of the present, spending a conversation planning my next meeting instead of listening fully to the person before me. This examination required complete honesty. There was no point in deceiving myself about my failures. The goal wasn't to feel good about my performance, but to improve it. I would identify specific moments when I had acted from emotion rather than reason, when I had pursued personal advantage rather than virtue, when I had forgotten the temporary nature of all circumstances, but I was careful not to turn this review into self-condemnation. Stoicism taught me that mistakes were inevitable parts of human growth, opportunities to learn, rather than evidence of fundamental unworthiness. When I identified failures, I would ask, what does this teach me about my current level of development? How can I prepare to handle similar situations more virtuously in the future? I would also examine my interactions with others. Did I treat people as fellow rational beings deserving of respect, or did I allow my position to make me arrogant? Did I listen to understand their perspectives, or did I simply wait for my turn to speak? Did I respond to criticism with openness to learning or with defensive pride? The evening review included gratitude practice. What did I appreciate today that I might have taken for granted? Perhaps it was the loyalty of my guards, the competence of my advisors, the prosperity that allowed Rome to fund public works, or simply the fact that I was alive and healthy enough to serve. This gratitude exercise connected me to the abundance that surrounded me even during difficult periods, I would conclude by setting intentions for tomorrow. Based on today's experiences, how do I want to grow tomorrow? What philosophical principles do I need to remember? What virtues do I want to practice more consciously? This forward-looking element transformed reflection into preparation, ensuring that each day's lessons informed the next day's actions. Sometimes I would write brief reminders to myself, remember that other people's opinions are not within your control. The obstacle is the path forward. This, too, shall pass. These notes served as philosophical anchors during future challenges, distilled wisdom from my own experience that I could reference when facing similar situations. This practice of evening review gradually transformed my character. By consistently examining my actions against philosophical standards, I became more aware of my patterns and more intentional about changing them. The gap between my ideals and my behavior slowly narrowed as daily reflection reinforced daily practice. One of the greatest tests of philosophical wisdom comes from dealing with difficult people, those who oppose you, criticize you, betray your trust, or simply seem determined to make your life more challenging. My years as emperor provided countless opportunities to practice these lessons with senators who undermined my policies, generals who questioned my strategies, and citizens who blamed me for circumstances beyond my control. The first principle I learned was this: difficult people are actually gifts in disguise, opportunities to practice patience, understanding, and virtue under pressure. When a senator named Cassius led a rebellion against my rule, spreading lies about my competence and character, my initial reaction was anger and hurt. How could someone I had treated fairly turn against Rome and me so completely? But then I applied Stoic principles to the situation. Cassius's actions were beyond my control. I could not reach into his mind and change his thoughts or motivations. What I could control was my response to his rebellion. I could choose to see him as an evil enemy deserving destruction, or I could try to understand what fears, ambitions, or misunderstandings had led him to this desperate course of action. I realized that Cassius's rebellion actually revealed more about his character than mine. His choice to spread false accusations and incite violence demonstrated his values and decision-making processes. My response to his actions would demonstrate mine. If I reacted with vindictive cruelty, I would prove myself unworthy of leadership. If I responded with justice tempered by mercy, I would honor both my philosophical principles and my duty to Rome. When we captured Cassius, I chose to understand rather than simply punish. Through investigation, I discovered that he had been motivated partly by genuine concerns about imperial policies and partly by personal ambitions. His rebellion was wrong, but his underlying worries about Rome's direction deserved consideration. I addressed his legitimate concerns through policy changes while still maintaining consequences for his treasonous actions. This experience taught me that difficult people often carry important messages wrapped in unpleasant packaging. The senators who constantly criticized my spending might be genuinely concerned about Rome's fiscal health, even if he expressed those concerns through personal attacks. The general who questioned my military strategies might have valuable tactical insights, even if his manner of sharing them seemed insubordinate. I developed a practice of looking beyond people's difficult behaviors to understand their underlying needs, fears, or motivations. This didn't mean accepting disrespectful treatment or compromising important principles. It meant responding to the deeper human reality behind surface antagonism. Another key insight was that difficult people are usually struggling with their own internal conflicts. The senator who attacked me most viciously was often the one most afraid of his own political vulnerability. The advisor who seemed most arrogant was frequently the one most insecure about his competence. Understanding this allowed me to respond with compassion rather than defensiveness. I also learned that you cannot control whether people like you, but you can control whether you deserve to be liked. Some citizens would always blame the emperor for their problems, regardless of actual policies or circumstances. Some senators would always oppose imperial initiatives, regardless of their merit. Rather than exhausting myself, trying to win universal approval, I focused on acting with integrity and letting my character speak for itself. When dealing with particularly challenging individuals, I would remind myself, this person is doing the best they can with their current level of understanding and emotional development. They are not my enemy. They are fellow human beings struggling with their own limitations and fears. This perspective didn't excuse harmful behavior, but it allowed me to respond from strength rather than reactive emotion. The most difficult people often became my greatest teachers in patience, humility, and strategic thinking. They forced me to clarify my own values, improve my communication skills, and develop emotional resilience that served me well in all areas of leadership. The ultimate test of philosophical wisdom comes not during peaceful times, but when everything around you seems to be falling apart. During my reign, I faced what seemed like an endless series of catastrophes: plague, war, political upheaval, and economic crisis, often occurring simultaneously. Learning to maintain inner peace during these chaotic periods became my greatest achievement and my most valuable teaching. The worst period came during what I now think of as the Year of Three Disasters. The Antonine Plague was ravaging our eastern provinces. Germanic tribes had broken through our northern defenses in multiple locations, and severe flooding along the Tiber had destroyed much of Rome's grain supply. Each crisis demanded immediate attention, yet I had limited resources to address any of them adequately. My advisors were in panic mode, offering contradictory advice and pressing for immediate decisions that might solve one problem while creating others. Citizens were afraid, blaming the government for every hardship. Senate meetings became shouting matches as different factions promoted their preferred solutions. The palace itself felt like a ship in a storm, with everyone running in different directions and no one sure which way was forward. It was during this chaos that I discovered what I came to call the eye of the storm principle. In the center of a hurricane, there is a place of perfect calm where the winds cannot reach. Similarly, in the center of any crisis, there is a space of inner peace that external circumstances cannot touch, but you must consciously choose to inhabit that space. I found this place by returning to the fundamental Stoic insight. I could not control the plague, the barbarians, or the flooding, but I could control my response to these challenges. Instead of trying to solve everything at once, I focused on making one good decision at a time. Instead of being overwhelmed by the magnitude of our problems, I concentrated on taking the next right action. I established what I called clarity rituals during this period. Every morning before meeting with advisors or reviewing crisis reports, I would spend 30 minutes in silent reflection, asking myself, what is actually within my power right now? What does virtue demand in this situation? How can I serve Rome's long-term interests rather than just reacting to immediate pressures? This practice created a bubble of calm around me that others could feel and draw strength from. When the emperor remained steady, it gave everyone else permission to think clearly rather than panic. My equanimity became a stabilizing force that helped our entire government function more effectively during the crisis. I also discovered that chaos often reveals opportunities that would be invisible during stable times. The plague forced us to develop new medical protocols and public health systems that served Rome well for generations. The barbarian invasions pushed our military to innovate tactics and strategies that made us stronger in the long run. The flooding led to improved engineering and urban planning that prevented future disasters. The key was learning to see chaos not as evidence that everything was going wrong, but as a teacher that was showing us where our systems needed improvement. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to us?" I began asking, "What is this teaching us? How can we emerge from this stronger and wiser?" I learned to distinguish between urgent and important. Chaos creates many urgent demands for attention, but not all urgent things are truly important. By staying connected to my core values and long-term objectives, I could focus on actions that were both urgent and important, while letting less critical. Urgent matters wait. Most importantly, I discovered that peace is not the absence of problems, it's the presence of wisdom in how you relate to problems. You can find tranquility in the midst of any storm when you remember that your true strength lies not in controlling external circumstances, but in choosing virtuous responses to whatever circumstances arise. You might wonder how principles developed by a Roman emperor 2,000 years ago could possibly apply to your modern life. The answer is that while the surface details of human existence have changed dramatically, the fundamental challenges of being human remain constant. You still struggle with stress, difficult relationships, disappointment, and the search for meaning, just as I did, just as every person throughout history has done. Let me show you how each of the 10 Stoic laws translates directly to contemporary challenges. The first law, controlling only what you can control, is perhaps more relevant today than ever. You live in an age of information overload, where news of disasters, political conflicts, and economic uncertainties floods your awareness daily. Most of these events are completely beyond your influence, yet they can consume your mental energy and create constant anxiety if you let them. Apply this law by asking yourself, can I personally affect the outcome of this situation? If the answer is no, practice accepting it while focusing your energy on areas where you do have influence: your skills, your relationships, your health, your character. You cannot control whether your company restructures, but you can control how well you perform your current job and how you prepare for potential changes. The second law, embracing impermanence, helps you navigate modern pressures around career success and material accumulation. Your culture often promotes the illusion that achieving certain goals will provide permanent happiness or security. Understanding impermanence frees you from this trap. Your current job, your present circumstances, even your problems are all temporary. This perspective helps you appreciate good times without clinging to them and endure difficult periods without despair. The third law, mastering your inner dialogue, is crucial for mental health in an age of social media comparison and information overwhelm. Your mind constantly interprets events, and these interpretations create your emotional experience. When your project receives criticism, you can choose to think, I'm incompetent, or I'm receiving valuable feedback for improvement. Both thoughts are interpretations, but they create completely different emotional and behavioral outcomes. The fourth law, virtue as the only true good, provides an anchor in a culture obsessed with external achievements. Success, wealth, and status are preferences, not necessities for a meaningful life. When you understand this, you can pursue external goals without being enslaved by them. You work for promotion because it serves your values, not because you need it for self-worth. The fifth law, transforming obstacles into opportunities, reframes every setback as potential growth. Lost your job? This might be the push you needed to pursue work more aligned with your values. Relationship ended? You now have the opportunity to develop independence and clarity about what you want in a partner. Health challenges? These force you to prioritize what truly matters and develop inner strength. The remaining laws apply equally well. Living according to nature means using your rational mind and social consciousness to make decisions rather than being driven purely by impulse or emotion. Negative visualization helps you appreciate your current blessings and prepare emotionally for potential losses. Present moment focus combats the anxiety and distraction that characterize modern life. Emotional equilibrium prevents you from being thrown off course by the daily ups and downs of work, relationships, and circumstances. Serving something greater than yourself provides meaning and purpose that transcends personal achievements. the practical applications are limitless. In your workplace, these principles help you focus on performance and contribution rather than office politics and things beyond your control. In relationships, they help you respond thoughtfully rather than reactively, focusing on your own behavior rather than trying to change others. In personal challenges, they provide a framework for growth and resilience. Start by choosing one law that most resonates with your current situation. Practice it consciously for a week, noticing how it changes your experience. Then gradually incorporate the others as they become relevant to challenges you face. These principles have guided humans through 2 millennia of change because they address the unchanging aspects of human nature and the human condition. As I near the end of our time together, I want to leave you with the most important insights from my journey as both emperor and philosopher. These 10 Stoic laws transformed not just how I ruled an empire, but how I experienced life itself. They can do the same for you, regardless of your circumstances or position. The greatest discovery of my life was this: true freedom comes not from having power over others, but from having power over yourself. I commanded legions and governed millions, yet the most important battles I fought were internal: the struggle to maintain virtue under pressure, to choose wisdom over expedience, to serve something greater than my own desires. These inner victories were more significant than any military conquest because they determined the quality of every moment I lived. You possess this same capacity for inner sovereignty. Every day you face choices between virtue and vice, between wisdom and folly, between courage and cowardice. These choices, accumulated over time, create your character and determine your experience of life. No external force can make these choices for you. They remain eternally within your power. The 10 laws I've shared are not merely philosophical concepts to be admired from a distance. They are practical tools forged in the crucible of real leadership challenges and refined through daily application. When you truly understand that you can only control your own thoughts and actions, anxiety begins to dissolve. When you embrace the temporary nature of all circumstances, you find peace with change. When you master your inner dialogue, you discover that you can choose your own experience regardless of external events. But understanding these principles intellectually is not enough. You must practice them consistently until they become part of your automatic response to life's challenges. This requires patience with yourself and commitment to growth. I spent decades developing these habits, and I was still learning new applications when death approached. Start where you are, with whatever challenges you currently face. Apply one law at a time until it becomes natural, then add another. The senator who frustrated me became an opportunity to practice patience. The military setback that discouraged my generals became a chance to demonstrate resilience. The plague that terrified my citizens became an invitation to show courage and service. Your current difficulties, whatever they are, can become your training ground for wisdom and virtue. Remember that setbacks in your philosophical practice are not failures. They are information about areas that need more attention. When you catch yourself trying to control the uncontrollable, celebrate the awareness rather than condemning the mistake. When you notice yourself being overwhelmed by impermanent circumstances, gently return to the perspective of eternal principles. Progress in philosophy, like progress in any skill, comes through consistent practice, not perfection. The legacy I want to leave is not one of military victories or architectural monuments, but of lives transformed by timeless wisdom. If these principles help you find greater peace, stronger relationships, and deeper meaning, then my reign will have served its highest purpose. The empire I governed was limited by geography and time, but the empire of wisdom has no boundaries and no expiration date. You are now equipped with the same philosophical tools that sustained me through plague, war, political upheaval, and personal loss. Use them not just for your own benefit, but in service of others who need the stability and wisdom that these principles can provide. Become a living example of Stoic virtue, demonstrating through your actions that it is possible to maintain inner peace and moral clarity, regardless of external circumstances. The greatest honor you can give these teachings is to live them fully, allowing them to transform your character and, through your character, to benefit everyone whose life you touch. In this way, the wisdom of ancient Rome continues to serve humanity long after the empire itself has passed into history. Go forward with courage, knowing that you possess everything needed to live with virtue, wisdom, and inner peace. The 10 more laws await your application, and through that application, your transformation begins.